Well, welcome back to another episode of the Financially Free Journey podcast. And I'm your host, Courtney Dyer. And as you guys know, this podcast aims to dispel the seemingly complex topic of personal finances and money management, debt, savings, investing, retirement, and all things small business. Now, I want to frame this up for you guys because why are we trying to achieve financial freedom? What is the point? The point is that we want to be able to have time freedom to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, where we want. And that connects to us being truly happy. And in order to really support our true happiness, living in the present is something that I think a lot of us struggle with, right? Because we're on the grind trying to pay off debt, increase our income, increase our investing strategy, but we may at times forget to live in the present. And my guest today, Jessica Gershman, is an expert. She is called the Zen Mommy, in fact, and she's here to talk to us about living in the present and how we can be mindful around doing that. So, Jessica, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I am great, Courtney. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited because, we normally will dive deep into financial vehicles and investing strategies, but, this is so critical, especially for our listeners, because, we're trying to get to that next level, right? And we're trying to do all of it, and we're living in such a fast-paced world, and remembering to live in the present is something that I think a lot of us forget. And then even it's like, how do I do that? There's so much going on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And slowing down is scary as shit.
Oh yeah,
Right?
it is. It's like, but I won't get everything done on my to-do list. So I can't do that. So tell us just a little bit about how you became the Zen Mommy.
Right. Well, the Zen Mommy is definitely a work in progress, right? So there's no kind of end goal you've really achieved, but it's always being on the journey. And I think that we live in a society, well, I know we do, that's very materialistic, and success is measured by how much money you have, what car you drive, what kind of house you live in, what vacations you take. Also, success is comparing to those that have more or less than you. And Shakespeare quoted it best as that comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh, so true.
And we live in this always yearning, moving toward the next thing. We're never really stopped being satisfied or grateful for what we have, and really taking a look around with open eyes, with presence, with awareness, and being like, man, look at all these beautiful blessings. And I am driven. I was given a Sanskrit name when I graduated one of my 500-hour programs, and it was Avasita, which means determined one. So I am right in line with the hustle. I've always been a hustler. I started my career in commercial real estate at 19.
Oh, girl. Yeah, you've gone polar opposite is what you're
Right?
saying.
There was a lot of struggle. I went through a lot of struggles in my 20s before I found yoga. But there's the end goal, because you can't take your money with you, is really to find joy. I mean, truly, and to have love and joy, and being in the present moment is really the tool that can make all the other things possible.
But it's not absolutely.
Easy, right?
Yes. It's one of these critical foundational aspects to supporting our happiness that gets so overlooked because we're so focused on the mechanical and the tactical portions of getting there, right? And this is more of a beneath the surface discussion, which I really appreciate. And I just, you talk a lot about, the art of self-care for working moms, and a very large majority of our listeners are working moms. They're professionals, but they're balancing, the expectation of this like dual, role in their life. And so, what does that mean? Like the art of self-care, like, and how can I do that as a working mom? I can barely take a shower, Jessica. Like, how can I have self-care? Tell us.
Yeah. I mean, and I have 4 kids. So I raised my 2 stepsons. I have 2 little girls. I've had many businesses. I started a clothing line. I ran a yoga studio in my house. I'm now on this podcast and app journey. So I get it. I get what it's like to be a working mom. And I say this to my husband, there's always a choice. We may not like what the options are, but there's always a choice in that. And for me, it's like, okay, I could get up and immediately get on my phone, check my emails. I could choose to get up and go meditate. I could choose to lay in bed and, snooze for 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes we get caught in these habitual practices or these patterns. And as mothers, we are nurturing beings. I mean, in my opinion, we're the sensual beings. We are, the grower of life, the nurturer of life. It's in our DNA is to care for others. It is not acceptable to care for others at the expense of ourselves, because that will not last. Eventually, you will be so depleted, so exhausted, your health will decline. You're not going to be able to care for those around you. And so is there an art form to self-care? Yeah, because it looks different every single day. And some days you're going to do it better than others. Some days you're going to prioritize yourself better than others. Some days, with kids and business and work, shit will hit the fan, and it's not going to be the same. So I look at this as this art form, this kind of dance, and you have to be able to flow and move. But the baseline priority is you are your number one priority, period. Making yourself happy, taking care of yourself, your physical being, your emotional, your spiritual being, nourishing your body, whatever fills your bucket. And so what I always try to offer is what I call this kind of like toolbox situation, where I throw out, here's some mindfulness, here's breath, here's some, holistic wellness practices, here's some healthy living things. Try on all of these things like a really incredible black dress and figure out which ones work for you, and leave the rest of it. But that you start to cultivate your own personal toolbox that you can pull from each and every day and say, okay, stop and check in. What do I need today? What do I need to do for myself so that I can take care of my business, my family, my spouse, my friends, and show up for all of those people in our lives that I know that we want to do as working moms.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think I know I personally, I have 3 small kids. I had a baby last year and my oldest is 8. So they're all like, I'm in the thick of it, right? They're little.
You are in the ground.
Yes, I am. And, you hear this, right? It's like, I know I need to take care of myself, because you always hear the phrase, it's like, hey, you got to put your oxygen mask on before you put on theirs, right? To be able to help other people. But, it feels like in the moment, in the challenges of everyday life, it's like you feel that you don't have that option. It's like, there's a lot to do. I'll do the self-care tomorrow. Like that's what I find myself doing. So can you talk to us about that? Like, how do you make that switch? Because I think every woman can, whether you're a mother or not, I think every woman can really identify with that, because you should. It's like, I know I should eat healthy, but I'll start tomorrow. The same concept. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, I think it goes with this kind of societal opinion of I'll be happy when.
Yes.
Right. I'll take care of myself when I have more time. I'll be happy when I get this promotion, or when I get this in sales, or when, I achieve this or get this or gain this or whatever. And so we set ourselves up for failure, because happiness is an inside job. So it's something that we have to choose every day. And for me, it comes back to reframing priorities. And so the science-backed approach of yoga, meditation, is actually rewiring your brain. Right. So in Shavasana, in yoga, the brain softens through meditation. The brain starts to soften. It's malleable. You're doing positive affirmations. You're doing breath work. You're basically reconfiguring how your brain. So when you come out of meditation or come out of Shavasana or come out of these mindfulness practices, that you come back in a different pattern, that you can start to release some of these habitual responses. Like I call it the yogic pause, which gives me just that moment between cause and my reaction to decide what I'm going to do. And so when we look at self-care and we look at, taking care of ourselves, there will always be an excuse. There will always be some fire that has to be put out, but we really have to start to retrain our brain, our thought patterns, to prioritize ourselves. And it's a process. It's not just going to happen overnight, but maybe you say, okay, set yourself up for, I'm going to take 10 minutes when I wake up and I'm going to do some breath work and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to do it every day. 10 minutes. That's all, I'm asking for. Maybe if you have little kids, that's not the right time, but maybe you can put them down for a nap and you schedule it in your phone. Like we schedule everything else. I mean, my hair is getting gray. I schedule in my hair appointment every 6 weeks. I'm not going to miss that. Right. Yep. I mean, there are things we have the time. We just have to choose how to prioritize it. And I have to say, as much as I love the phone as, a tool for business, it is also the devil that we lose so much time scrolling Instagram, TikTok, all of the things, Instagram shopping. I'm right there. But we do have the time. It's just about reframing our patterns and reframing our kind of thought patterns on how we approach self-care.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? I actually wrote this down and I underscored it. Happiness is an inside job. Whoa, because, culturally speaking, we get sucked into like trying to find our happiness externally. And so that epiphany of saying, look, like happiness is an inside job. I am literally the only one that can make me happy. I think that can really flip a switch to prioritize yourself, because it's like, it ain't going to happen unless I do it. I mean, it's with a lot of these other fires that we end up prioritizing over ourselves, it's like, you know what? They might put themselves out, or maybe another firefighter can come. I mean, it's not only you, but your happiness is only you. And so prioritizing yourself is so critical. So you touched on this a couple times in regards to yoga. And so tell us a little bit more how that plays into this whole picture of, self-care and really like living in the moment, because I'm really curious around that.
Sure. So yoga, meditations, it's kind of been described that when you experience this, it widens your peripheral. It makes colors a little bit brighter, smells a little bit sweeter. The point of all this, it has to start with awareness. And I had a really wise teacher tell me one time that, 99.9% of the people walk around with a paper bag over their head. Obviously not a literal paper bag, but a figurative one. And they're not aware. We go through the motions, for one thing to the next, we do through the grind. I mean, you can picture those people. I was raised by a single mom of 3, and she had her head down in life and just barreled through, wasn't really kind of participating. You can go through life without really participating in it in any way. Yeah. I mean, you could just go through the motions. And so what slowing down does, what the tools to slow down, yoga was a big one for me. Sometimes I use yoga as this really broad brushstroke term. It's really about a way of living consciously. Yoga can also include walking in nature, being outside. Right now I'm sitting in my office and I've got my doors open. That's yoga to me too, that I'm able to experience and look at the sunshine coming through the trees while being productive. You have to start slowing down enough to even start to understand what your patterns are, what your habits are, how are you starting your day? I mean, we go through our day and it's like, boom, alarm hits, we're up, we're running, the kids, we got to get them off here. I mean, I'm with you. I'm all there with the 4 kids out the door, got it, ding, 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 ding. And then we're on and we're sitting in front of our computer and we've got our to-do list and we, knock it off. And we, at the end of the day, are exhausted. And then we go to sleep and do it all over again without really being kind of conscious and aware. And, for example, my daughter is 12 and a half, and I recently gave her a phone after, much negotiation.
Deliberation.
Exactly. But, in 7th grade, I was like, finally, I mean, she's probably like the very last one. I was like, well, your mom's a yogi, they'll know, that's why you don't have a phone. But our big conversation was about intention. And as it relates to the phone, and as much as this conversation is for my 12 and a half year old, it applies to me and applies to everyone listening, picking up our phone with intention. Like I'm all about Instagram, TikTok, scroll, do whatever you want to do, but go through it with intention. How often do you find yourself, oh my gosh, I went down the YouTube rabbit hole and 30 minutes have gone by. Where did that go?
Oh yeah.
But being very intentional with the things that you do in your day. If you pick up your phone, be like, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes intentionally scrolling through Instagram. It's just being conscious and present enough to understand how we really spend our time. And then from that conscious awareness, then we can start to make changes. If you're not conscious and aware, you can't make changes because you don't know what is even going on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what I love too is giving yourself permission to do these things. Like, we all are, oh, I shouldn't, I spend too much time. It's like, you know what? It's okay to indulge. And I think it's, if that's something that you intentionally are like, you know what? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to give myself X amount of time, whatever it is for you. I mean, it's different for everyone.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to enjoy this mindless scroll. Or, you know what? I am going to enjoy this, watching this Netflix series, whatever it is for you. But what you're also doing, it sounds like, Jessica, is giving yourself permission so you're not feeling that guilt, because it's okay to do. I think it's when it's in excess is when it takes away from your happiness. It's like walking a tightrope. And so, you want to be able to give yourself permission so you can enjoy it when you're doing it, and then have it also support your, living in the present as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, and living mindlessly leads to unhappiness. We never have enough time. We don't know how to prioritize ourselves. We're just kind of but mindlessly, maybe scrolling, but living with that intentionality. And I think that's what fosters happiness, when we start to be intentional with the things that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I mean, it sounds like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, this has really helped you with your personal freedom. I mean, am I picking up on what you're putting down here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you will say I was a pretty miserable person through my early 20s, and I very openly discussed suffering with eating disorders and struggling with addiction, and I was a type A overachiever and a preemie narcissist in the making. So I had to really change my life and turn my life around. And when at the birth of my first daughter in 2009, that was really the catalyst that gave me the strength to really make some really strong and profound transformations in myself, because I saw the path. I saw it in both my parents and where I was headed, and I didn't really like what that looked like and the kind of people. And sometimes just knowing what you don't want to become is enough. You may not know what you do want to become or where you want to go in your life, but you may know what you don't want. And that was enough for me. And yoga was the beginning of that transformative experience, because it was a very safe place for me to start to explore what was going on in my monkey mind. And I say this all the time. We all have an inner critic. We all have this negative self-talk, this reel that kind of, goes on repeat all the time. And it was able to give me not only the safe place to start to explore that chatter, but then also the actual tools. And like I said, the scientific piece of reforming and retraining my brain to choose differently, to start to recognize, okay, that's my inner critic. I did a meditation this morning and, visualize my inner critic. She has a name. Her name is Jordan. She has a certain look, and I was able to start to identify these things that were blockages for me from being successful in the word as being happy, being grateful, being participating in my life, and then also achieving professional success and business success, and still being able to come back and be an entrepreneur, which is scary and very lonely. You got to be your own hype man and go through that. I couldn't do that without the work that I continue to do on that inner critic side, or that negative self-reel. And yoga was that beautiful catalyst, that space for me to start to discover, my own patterns and really make changes.
Well, and one thing that I wanted to reiterate is something that I really hadn't been aware of until you said this right now, is really the scientific portion of yoga and meditation. And, like you had mentioned the word yogi, right? Or it's like, oh, well, her mom's a yogi. And what I find interesting about that is there is this concept around yoga where it's like, oh, it's for, yogis. It's, not that it's bad but it's like, oh, well, I'm too fast paced. I have so many things I need to do. But it's like, no, there's a scientific backing to this process and this activity that helps rewire your brain to where you can be more productive, it sounds like, in a more thoughtful and intentional way.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at all the top CEOs of Fortune 500 companies and you would ask them, I would say 99% of them are meditators or practice yoga or some kind of mindfulness practice in some ways. I mean, it allows you to come into the moment, to be productive, to be intentional with what we say. It doesn't absolve you from life's ups and downs. Right. So yoga is not this like end all cure all button where you're just like, boom, I'm not going to have any suffering. Boom, I'm not going to have any grief. It's
Right.
not that, but it allows you to start to ride the wave and realize that, you're going to come out of this on the other side. Everything is temporary. In business, we know there are like high highs and low lows, and all of them are temporary. Right? That's part of the wave. It goes up, it goes down, it goes back up again. But we start to be able to live in what we all kind of call in the yoga world, and everybody says it kind of differently, but in the flow state. And so we're really just riding the wave of what comes. We're not getting too rattled. We're taking things as they come. We're, observing them. We're evaluating them. We're making decisions, informed, educated, conscious decisions on how to proceed and move forward, and being able to pivot, not feeling stuck. I mean, I think everyone listening could understand at some point in their life or in their career or as an entrepreneur, this feeling of stuckness, of heaviness, of not really knowing where to go, not knowing where to find answers, or feeling, not creative or uninspired. And yoga truly helps start to remove the blockages, so that we can start to move through life a little less restricted, a little less sticky, a little more smooth, I guess, if I could describe it.
Well, there's so much going on and so much being thrown at us all the time, right? And you had mentioned CEOs, like 99% of them do some form of meditation and yoga. And you always hear about that too. It's like they went to this wilderness retreat so they could think. And, these are considered thought leaders, high production individuals. And so I wanted to connect that because, again, knowing, my listeners, and it's like, but I got a lot to do. Well, they've got a lot to do. Right. But they prioritize this as something that's critical over, all the dumpster fires that are happening. So one question I have for you is earlier, you're like, I'm in my office and I have the doors open. That's a form of yoga. Now, when I think about yoga or meditation, I'm thinking like downward dog. We've got to have a mat out. Can you go into that a little bit? Because that's another thing that might be a hang up for some people is like, no, yoga is not exactly just that, right? Like that picture that we all have.
Sure. And, there's a base and a history with yoga that's like 5,000 years old. And as we transition and we're in this kind of modern idea of yoga, and we learn from so many teachers, and we're able to basically create a yoga lifestyle where it transitions, which is the goal, because you don't just go to a yoga class and you have this really amazing feeling and you feel so good, and then you walk back into your life, and the second your toe is off the mat, the dings are happening and you're stressed and your heart rate, goes up and your blood pressure is high, and all the things. And so living a more conscious, aware, awoke life, living yogically, living present, is transitioning that same feeling of awareness of being in my mind and body into everything that I do. So living yogically happens on my mat, absolutely, in my practice, in meditation. That is a big piece, but it also transfers in how I relate to my children, how I relate to myself, what I think about the world, how I participate in my interactions with friends. And it's a practice, which I love, right? So you can't be bad at it. You cannot be bad at yoga. It's a practice.
I love that.
Yeah, because everyone's always the answer I get, well, I'm not good at it. I'm like, no, it's great. You can't be bad. This is your own personal experience. It is unique to you. It is your journey. It won't look like mine. And that is the beautiful part of it, is it's not something that is black and white. It's not something that you can be good at or bad at. It just is. And it becomes this evolved way of living, of just living consciously. And so
I love that.
This very broad brushstroke of how I live yogically.
You know, what's so funny is I was thinking, if you say you're bad at it, you probably really need it because you're that
Yeah.
type A person that's like giving yourself a yardstick for everything, even in something where there is no measurement of good or bad. So that was kind of funny to me because I was sitting here literally thinking, Jessica, I'm like, I bet I would be so bad at yoga. So,
Right.
So you said
Right. Says
that
everyone.
perfectly. Yes. Okay. I had a question for you because you're the Zen mommy, and we're talking about mindfulness, right? And we're using these tools of yoga and meditation to help rewire our brain to live in the moment, to make better, more intentional decisions when it comes to all aspects of our life, including our money and our business. But another aspect of our life is parenting, and a lot of the listeners are parents, and you talk a lot about mindfulness is every single day in your life, and also mindfulness in parenting. So, can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Parenting is hard, right?
I mean,
It just
that's an
is.
understatement.
Yeah. It's challenging, and I screw up every day. I'm always messing something up, and also celebrate my failures. But the mindfulness piece in parenting that has really made the big difference is I start to become less reactionary, because I have learned over the years of my practice that whatever's going on with my children isn't really about me. Right. And so we want everything to be about us because that's what our ego tells us. And we're like, it's our life. It's about us. It has to be. If she's lashing out at me, it must be because I've done something. Or, we really want to take things so very personally, where in fact, things aren't really personal at all. My daughters are having their own life, their own experiences. And so what parenting mindfully has allowed me to do is to start to soften some of those very reactive patterns, right? And I start to just take pause, especially with a preteen, right? She can get a little mouthy. And my initial reaction is to fight back with her, or argue that something is right, or take a stance on a certain way, or whatever, or engage in some kind of negative dialogue, right? Because that's what we end up getting sucked into as a parent, especially in preteens and teens, and anybody listening that have them at home knows what I'm talking about.
Bless you.
But it gives me this moment where I can just pause, and I don't have to say anything. And then I start to choose, okay? Then I even ask, I'm like, well, do you want my opinion, or do you just want to vent? Right. And so living mindfully gives me this moment where I can start to make conscious choices. I use my breath. I was like, how do you do this? I use breathing sometimes, all the time. I use the breath technique, breathing in through the nose, holding the breath, exhaling through the mouth, to get myself out of, scientifically, from fight or flight, which is where we live as Americans all the time.
Yeah.
And we're just ready to go. And, but we're not being chased by a bear. We're not having to run from a predator, which is what fight or flight is designed for. But because we are so stressed and we're amped and we're hyped all the time, that's where we live. And so breathing consciously drops me out of sympathetic fight or flight, ready to fight, to attack, into parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. And so that also allows me to access executive functioning in the brain. So my decision-making skills. You can't access executive functioning in the brain when you're in fight or flight. So why do CEOs use it? Why do top execs use it? Because they want to access executive functioning. They want to access critical thinking skills. They want to be able to have the tools. It's not because they're not stressed or that they don't go through this, but they have the tools to say, okay, I know I'm not going to be able to be my best self if I'm stressed and my blood pressure is high, my heart rate, and I'm elevated and I'm angry or frustrated or whatever. I'm amped in some way. So I'm going to use these tools, breathwork, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, to drop into parasympathetic nervous system, calm down, and be able to access higher thinking. That's really what it's about. So it could be parenting, business, whatever it is in your life that you're dealing with, to respond in in a conscious executive function, in a critical thinking manner, is definitely going to be a more successful way than in a reactionary fight or flight manner.
Oh, I love that. And again, the science behind it and
You can't
tapping
argue it.
into, yeah. So that's so interesting. And that also can correlate and transfer over to, as you mentioned with the CEOs, your business and your personal finances, being able to make, decisions with your executive function instead of the fight or flight, because, that is our initial reaction and it's an emotional reaction versus a logical reaction or decision, to the situation. So,
Exactly.
oh, I love that. Okay. So if the listeners could only take away like one thing, only remember one thing from this episode, what do you want it to be?
I think living consciously, gives you the choice. And I think that is really important. So that can mean a lot of different things, but, cultivating your own tools, figuring out what works for you, understanding your own stress patterns. How do you respond to stress? What happens physiologically? What happens in your body? Do you get sweaty? Do you clench your jaw? So that you can start to identify these triggers, and then cultivating your own tools, because that's going to set you up for a successful life. So whether you are downloading my Zen Mommy app and you're getting the tools there, or you're getting meditation practices somewhere else, or you're working just on conscious breathing, that there are tools accessible to you to live a more conscious life.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask you. First of all, how has it been creating and launching your own app? Because you're not a type A at all to create your own app. How was that experience?
It's always learning and growing. I joke about that my friends would say I don't read the Yelp reviews. So meaning that like I just go 2 feet into whatever it is that I'm doing. And,
right.
This idea that I'll just, if I'm not growing, I'm not doing something right. If I'm not improving. So I'm the opposite of like the primary researcher that, never is a failure to launch. I'm like, I launch without looking.
I love it.
So,
yep.
Yeah. You definitely get in there and get your hands dirty. But it's like anything, a growing and learning experience. I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to get these tools out. And really, I share 3 principles on the app, which is nourishment. So what you put in your body. We're gluten and dairy free, which are high inflammatory foods, refined sugar free, again, causing inflammation in the body. So increasing stress, all of that stuff that we don't want. So that's the nourish piece. I teach cooking and I have a recipe database. The mindfulness or the mindset piece, which is so important. That's what we've been talking about. And it's really a way to live and approach life. And then the movement piece, which is moving our body. So moving stuck energy. And for me, and yoga is such a gentle way to move our body that's accessible to most. And so through that app, I'm able to share those 3 pillars that really have set me up foundationally to continue on my path. And learning and growing along the way. I can't say I've figured it out yet. Life changes all the time. App space changes all the time. But I'm having a lot of fun, which is important. I get to learn so much through my podcast, Mom Slow Down. And I feel so grateful to, meet with people like you, Courtney, and spread the mission and spread the word of these tools and also learn from amazing guests that I get to have conversations with. So I have to say that I'm super grateful about it.
Oh, that's fantastic. So the Zen Mommy, can the listeners download it is it for Android and iPhone or?
Yeah, no, Zen Mommy you can download on Apple and Google Play. It's a free download. 30% of the content in the app will always be free. There's a space in there for a gratitude journal practice. I'm able to send out journal prompts and just little mindfulness reminders. We're creating a community board so other like-minded women can connect and share life. And then obviously there's tons of tools on there that are free. And then it's $9.99 a month behind the paid wall, but everybody gets a free week when they download it to check everything out. And it's on Apple and Google Play.
Oh, that's great. And the Slow Down Mommy podcast as well. I'll make sure to link both of these in the show notes, guys. That way, if this is something that has spoken to you, definitely go check it out because it's it's worth taking the time to prioritize yourself, to make sure that you are indulging in the art of self-care, because it really isn't indulging at all, is it? That's what we've learned during this episode. And so, we can tap into the executive function portion of our brain, make better decisions, live in the moment, have mindfulness within our interactions and our relationships in our lives. So, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. It's definitely a fresh take for the show, and I know the listeners are really going to love it. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Courtney. Thank you.
And guys, you know where to find me. It's at Financially Free Journey on Instagram, TikTok, financiallyfreejourney.com. And I post daily tips and motivation to help you on your path to financial freedom. Until next time.